Around 50 million years ago, the Indian subcontinent crashed into Asia with immense geological force. The collision folded the Earth's crust and pushed an entire landscape toward the sky. From that impact, the Himalayas were born, the roof of the planet. In this world of rock, ice and thin air, Nepal emerged. A land isolated by colossal mountain walls. A place where one-horned rhinos still wander like relics of prehistory. Where small communities cling to steep cliffsides. And where Mount Everest rises through the thinning edge of Earth's atmosphere. But Nepal is not extraordinary because of its geography alone. While most of the world is living in the year 2026, Nepal has already entered the year 2082. A country where time itself seems to follow a different rhythm. From Nepal's borders, 8 of the tallest mountains on Earth rise into the sky. Together they form a fortress of rock and ice that blocks monsoon winds from the Indian Ocean, feeds Asia's great rivers, and influences the climate of billions of people. Even Everest Base Camp stands higher than most mountains on Earth will ever reach. An extraordinary country. A country that almost shouldn't exist. And this is only the beginning of Nepal. South of the mountains, the land flattens into rice paddies and subtropical heat. Green fields stretch toward the horizon, broken by scattered houses and lines of trees. This is Lumbini province, where agriculture and settlement share the same valley floor. In Butwal and Nepalganj, colourful buildings press against busy roads, auto rickshaws weaving between intersections as evening light settles over rooftops. Further into the hills, Tance and Palpa sits among terraced farmland, its red and blue rooftops forming a patchwork against forested slopes. But the province is known for something older than any of its towns. Near the Indian border, a white stupa rises above gardens and lily-covered ponds. This is Lumbini, where Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would become the Buddha, was born around 563 BCE. The site was confirmed centuries later by an Ashokan pillar erected in 249 BCE, one of the oldest stone inscriptions on the subcontinent. Nearby, the Ramgram Stupa holds what is believed to be the only undisturbed collection of his actual remains, sealed over 2,500 years. Pilgrims circle the grounds in quiet procession. Countries from across the world have built monuments here, golden spires, painted halls, geometric gardens, each a different interpretation of the same devotion. East of Lumbini, the plains give way to dense jungle and slow-moving rivers. Chitwan National Park sits in a valley that, until the 1950s, took weeks to reach on foot from Kathmandu. For generations, it served as the private hunting ground of Nepal's Rana rulers. A royal hunting expedition in 1938 killed 120 tigers and 38 rhinos in this same valley. By the 1960s, the greater one-horned rhinoceros had crashed to roughly 100 animals. The jungle that once echoed with gunfire went quiet. Today, that valley is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the rhinos have returned. The 2021 census counted 752, the second largest population in the world, after Kaziranga in India. Solitary animals graze through tall grasslands in the early morning mist, their armour-plated skin catching the light as they move toward the river. Langurs sit in the canopy above, mothers holding infants against the branches. Below, the Rapti River winds through rainforest under open sky, its current slow enough to reflect the tree line on both banks. The park holds one of the highest densities of Bengal tigers in Asia, though they move through the tall grass unseen more often than not. Further west and higher up, the landscape shifts. In Rolpa, terraced farmland climbs green hillsides under low cloud. The village of Gati Gan clusters on a ridge, colourful roofs pressed together, a narrow road winding through. Some slopes show the orange-brown scars of fire damage against otherwise healthy forest. Deeper into the valley, Theawang sits in near total isolation. Traditional houses with grey walls and blue metal roofs line the terraces. A river cuts through below. Rows of blue solar panels catch the morning light, one of the few signs that the outside world reaches here at all. The hills are quiet. Life continues at a pace the lowlands left behind decades ago. The Kathmandu Valley sits at 1,400 metres in a basin that was once a prehistoric lake. A legend says the Bodhisattva Manjushri cut through the southern rim with a sword to drain the water, and the gorge at Stupas still marks the spot. What filled the emptied lake was a civilization. The valley's recorded history stretches back roughly 2,000 years. And its name comes from Kathmandu, a wooden pavilion said to have been carved from a single sal tree. In 1979, UNESCO designated 7 monument zones across the valley, recognising an architectural tradition that some scholars believe originated here, before spreading to India, China, and Japan. On a hilltop west of the city centre, Swayambhunath rises above the urban sprawl. Its white dome and golden spire catch the light against a hazy sky, prayer flags stretching outward in every direction. From above, the stupa looks small against the dense city pressing toward its base. Pilgrims and visitors walk the grounds beneath it, circling in the same direction their predecessors have followed for centuries. Across the valley, Budhanath commands a different kind of presence. The stupa is massive, its whitewashed dome visible from blocks away, the painted eyes gazing outward from the gilded tower. By day, the surrounding rooftops crowd the frame in reds and blues. At night, the structure glows against the dark, prayer flags still moving in the wind above. The base is never empty. Along the Bagmati River, Pashupatinath Temple occupies the opposite end of the sacred spectrum. Its layered golden roof rises above the riverbank, surrounded by carved stone and white-walled shrines. Cremation fires burn on stone platforms at the water's edge, families performing final rites as smoke lifts into the afternoon light. A close-up, the temple walls reveal dense carvings of human figures and twisting patterns worn smooth by centuries of weather and Hans. Above the valley, Turgar O Selling Monastery sits on a green ridge, its pagoda rooftop framed by trees and the city below. From above, Kathmandu reveals what the streets cannot. The valley floor spreads in every direction, a dense grid of colourful buildings, 5 and 6 stories high, pressed together with barely a gap between them. Roads thread through the mass in irregular patterns, traffic visible even from altitude. A river runs through the centre, its banks lined with concrete and, in places, with waste. The city holds over 1.5 million people in a basin that sits at 1,400 metres. Surrounded on all sides by green hills that rise steeply from the valley edge. The geological story is still visible. This was once a lake bed, and the flat terrain that made settlement possible is the same sediment floor that collected over millennia before the water drained south through Chobar. What replaced the lake is one of the most densely built cities in South Asia. From a drone moving slowly across the valley, the scale becomes difficult to process. Block after block of concrete and brick, interrupted only by the occasional temple roof or patch of surviving green. Vehicles inch along narrow roads below. Construction cranes mark the edges of the expanding cities. And yet, the mountains are always there. Snow-capped peaks line the northern horizon, visible above the haze on clear mornings. The contrast between the sprawling urban floor and the Himalayan wall behind it is one of the most striking views anywhere in the region. Pulling further back, the valley's full shape comes into focus. 4 mountain ranges ring the basin green ridges, covered in forest and terraced farmland, dotted with small settlements and the occasional hilltop structure. The air above the city often carries a haze that thins as elevation increases, so that the foothills appear sharper than the city itself. On the eastern rim, the panorama shifts. Lush slopes give way to a sweeping view, the hazy city on one side, the white peaks of the Himalaya on the other. Forested ridges run in parallel lines toward the horizon, small villages tucked between them. To the west, Chandragiri Hill rises above the valley with a cable car running up its forested slope. At the top, a hilltop resort and a small pagoda sit among the trees, prayer flags strung between trunks. On clear days, the view from here extends from the Kathmandu sprawl below to the summit of Everest on the far horizon. The valley looks like what it is, an ancient lake bed filled with 2,000 years of human occupation, ringed by mountains that predate everything built here. At street level, Kathmandu is a different city. Along the ring road, 6 lanes of traffic push through cars, buses, motorcycles, with the Himalayan peaks visible at the end of every straight stretch. Near the old centre, Rani Pokhara sits behind iron railings, its white and gold temple reflected in still water, purple jacaranda blossoms framing the edges. Nearby, the Kumari Gar stands in carved brick and lattice residence of the Kumari Devi, a Newari girl chosen by 32 perfections as a living goddess. Closer still, the details multiply. Window frames become geometric patterns. Doorways carry figures of deities and mythological creatures, a lion-faced, bird-winged figure carved in weathered sandstone. The craftsmanship is Newari, layered over generations. Along the Bagmati River, the water runs grey between temple walls and concrete banks. Monkeys sit near their ghats at Pashupatinath, where Hindus believe the river carries the souls of the cremated toward the Ganges. The banks show both devotion and neglect sacred architecture beside accumulated waste. After dark, the city transforms. During Tihar, the Himalayan Festival of Lights, the streets and rooftops light up in rivers of gold and colour. The dense grid of buildings becoming a single or glowing surface against the dark mountain range behind. East of Kathmandu, the valley narrows toward Bhaktapur. From above, the city appears as a dense cluster of red brick and terracotta rooftops, green mountains rolling behind it under overcast sky. On the ground, the scale shifts. Brick-paved streets open into wide squares lined with multi-tiered wooden temples and palace facades. This is Durbar Square, the centre of the Malla Kingdom that ruled here from the 15th century. The 55-window palace rises above the square, its carved wooden frames looking out over the same cobblestones they have watched for 500 years. Nearby, the Golden Gate marks the entrance to the Royal Courtyard, one of the most celebrated works of Newari metalcraft in the valley. Flanking the stairs of the city Lakshmi temple, stone figures stand in pairs, guardians carved with a precision that has not softened with age. Weathered lions and elephants hold their posts at the base of other structures, surfaces smoothed by rain and hands. Close up, the details accumulate. Ornate metal gates, carved lattice windows, temple bells hanging in still air. The craftsmanship is Nawari, a tradition built on interlocking joints and layered construction designed to absorb the movement of the earth. Now that engineering has been tested. The Nyadapola Temple, built in 6 months in 1702, rises 30 metres above the square, the tallest temple in Nepal. It survived the 8.3 magnitude earthquake of 1934 and the 7.8 magnitude earthquake of 2015, both of which damaged structures around it. The temple still stands, its 5-tiered roof intact, stone guardians ascending the staircase in pairs. Wrestlers at the base, elephants above, then lions, griffins, and goddesses at the top. Before the 2015 earthquake, the streets looked much as they had for centuries. Locals moved through open squares and temple courtyards in daily routine, surrounded by architecture that predated most of what stands in the rest of the valley. Beyond the valley rim, the land begins to climb. Terraced rice paddies step up green hillsides, broken by winding rivers and small villages with colourful rooftops. The roads narrow, the settlements thin. The transition from the Kathmandu basin to the highlands happens gradually. Fields giving way to forest, hilltop towns appearing between ridges, the Himalaya rising behind. To the north, the Langtang region opens into a different scale entirely. Snow-capped peaks tower above deep valleys, their summits often wrapped in cloud. A winding river runs through the bottom of the gorge, barely visible from the ridgeline. In the villages below, houses with blue roofs sit in tight clusters between, and herds of mules graze on the sparse grassland against the wall of rock and ice behind them. In 2015, an earthquake triggered an avalanche that buried the entire village of Langtang. The valley has since been partly rebuilt, but the scars remain in the landscape. Further east, Kalanchauk sits on a ridge in Dolakha, its homes painted in reds, blues and greens against the brown hillside. From the high ground above the village, the Himalayan skyline stretches from the Langtang region toward the central ranges on the horizon. Winding roads cut through the terrain below, connecting settlements that might otherwise remain completely isolated. On the rolling hills of Shillong, the feeling changes again. Lush grass covers the slopes under open sky. A white Buddhist stupa stands on a hilltop with prayer flags stretching in every direction. Yaks graze nearby. A narrow path leads through the green toward a small lodge, the only structure visible for some distance. At the edge of Helambu, Amayangrai Peak catches the first light of morning. The hilltop monument is draped in prayer flags, the Gauri Shankar range glowing behind it. The Tamang people consider this peak sacred, and the sunrise pilgrimage to its summit has continued for generations. West of Kathmandu, the road descends into the Pokhara Valley. The city sits at 827 metres on the shore of Phiwa Lake. With the Annapurna Massif and the spear-shaped peak of Machapachare rising directly behind it. Few cities sit this close to such vertical relief cafes and guest houses at lake level. And 6,993 metres of rock and ice visible from every window. From above, the city spreads across a green valley floor, colourful rooftops pressing outward toward farmland and forested hills besiste. On hazy mornings, the mountains float above the mist like a separate landscape entirely. At the lake, wooden boats drift across still water, the Tal Barahi Temple, sitting on its island near the southern shore. The surrounding hills are steep and covered in forest, their ridgelines dropping straight to the waterline. On one of those ridges, the world peace, a stupa, stands white against the green, its golden spire catching the sunrise. The Annapurna range fills the horizon behind it. Below the city, the Gandaki River winds through a mix of farmland, villages, and the Prithvi Highway. The Kali Gandaki, which feeds it, runs between Dhaulagiri at 8,167 metres and Annapurna at 8,091. A vertical drop of over 5,500 metres that makes this one of the deepest gorges on Earth. Geologists believe the river is older than the mountains themselves, cutting through the rock as tectonic forces push the Himalayas upward around it. Further downstream, the Kushma suspension bridge spans the gorge in a single line of cable and steel, anchored between two forested hillsides. Bungee jumpers launch from a platform near its centre. The river far below. Oxen work the terraced fields on the slopes above, and cattle share the trail with trekkers heading north toward the high passes. North of Pokhara, the trail climbs into the Annapurna range. The name comes from Sanskrit Annapurna, goddess of nourishment, though the mountain itself offers little comfort. Annapurna 1 stands at 8,091 metres with a fatality rate of roughly 32%, the highest of any 8,000er on Earth. The approach begins in subtropical valleys, where waterfalls pour off cliffs into deep gorges and four-wheel drive vehicles inch along narrow mountain roads toward Manang. In the lower villages, Gandruk, Lamjung stone and timber houses sit on terraced hillsides. Prayer flags strung between rooftops. The Annapurna Massif rising white behind them. Donkeys carry cargo across suspension bridges that span deep gorges, trekkers following close behind. Higher up, the landscape dries out. The village of Baraka clings to a steep slope, its whitewashed walls and red trim pressed against bare rock. A monastery visible at the edge of the settlement. White stupas stand on grassy ridges above, small groups of trekkers resting in their shadow with a full panorama of the range behind them. At Annapurna Base Camp, red-roofed buildings sit in a bowl of snow and rock, the peaks closing in from every side. Prayer flags snap in the wind. A solitary figure crosses the snowfield, trekking poles marking each step against the white expanse. Mountaineers move in single file across steep ridges above Manang, the scale of the terrain reducing them to specks. The circuit crosses Thorong La Pass at 5,416 metres, where the air holds roughly half the available oxygen of sea level. Beyond the pass, the trail leads toward Tiliko Lake at 4,919 metres, one of the highest lakes in the world. The water is turquoise, almost unnaturally bright, against the surrounding snow and grey rock. In winter, the surface freezes solid. In summer, the mountains reflect in perfect stillness. From the base camp above, the lake and the peaks behind it fill the frame in a single, unbroken line of blue, white, and stone. East of the Annapurna circuit, Manaslu rises to 8,163 metres, the world's 8th highest peak. Its name comes from Sanskrit, meaning spirit. Below the summit, colourful tents scatter across the rocky base camp, clouds drifting around the snow-covered face above. The trail to Lark Pass crosses stone villages where farmers carry heavy loads along dirt paths. And prayer wheels turn beside walls of stacked mani stones. Lower down, Birendra Lake sits in a bowl of rock and glacial debris. Its water turquoise and still, chunks of ice floating near the shore. Trekkers stand at the edge, small against the peaks behind them. North of the Annapurna Range, in the rain shadow of two 8,000ers, the landscape turns to desert. Upper Mustang was closed to outsiders until 1992 and still requires a restricted permit. The terrain looks nothing like the rest of Nepal. Layered canyons cut through orange, red and beige rock, their walls sculpted by wind into hoodoos and towers. Riverbeds wind through arid valleys where the only green comes in thin strips along the water. Ancient chortens stand alone on barren ridges, mud and stone bleached by sun. Near Dakma, cliffside caves pock the rock-face dwellings and burial chambers used for centuries in this high-altitude desert. A lone vehicle follows a dirt road through brown hills toward Lo Manthang, the walled capital settled around 1380. Kagbeni sits at the edge of the gorge. Stone buildings pressed together under overcast sky. A shepherd driving black goats along the path below. Yaks stand on a nearby slope, the misty Himalaya behind them. The wind does not stop here. The trail into the Everest region begins with a crossing. Suspension bridges span deep gorges above the Dud Koshi River, their cables strung with prayer flag. Mules and porters sharing the narrow planks with trekkers heading north. The river below runs pale turquoise from glacial melt, winding between steep slopes of bare rock and sparse green forest. The path climbs through Koshi province, which spans from 72 metres at Biratnagar to 8,849 metres at the summit of Everest is. A vertical range of nearly 9 kilometres contained within a single administrative boundary. In the lower Khumbu, villages sit in tight clusters along the valley. At Fortsea, stone houses with coloured roofs step up the hillside behind terraced walls. At Dingboshe, a white stupa with a golden spire stands at the edge of the settlement. Prayer flags stretching toward Amadablam and Everest behind it. Yaks graze on alpine meadows nearby, their shaggy coats catching the light. A herder guides them along the trail, the peaks rising behind in a wall of snow and rock. Above Dingboche, Tengboche Monastery sits on a forested ridge, red and orange buildings against the green, the Himalayan range filling the background. The monastery has been destroyed twice, by earthquake in 1934 and fire in 1989, and rebuilt each time by the Sherpa community. It remains the spiritual centre of the Khumbu. Higher still, the landscape strips away. Dugla Pass opens onto a field of stone cairns and prayer flags, each marking a climber who did not return from the peaks above. The memorials include Scott Fisher and many Sherpas whose names are less widely known. Trekkers pass through in silence, the snow-covered ridges of Amadablam rising behind. The Khumbu Glacier appears beyond the pass-wide ice streaked with dirt, jagged formations spreading between the rock walls of the valley. The glacier is visibly retreating, its edges broken and unstable. Everest Base Camp sits at 5,364 metres at the glacier's edge, a collection of tents and small structures dwarfed by the terrain above. To the west, the Gokyo Lakes rest in a chain at 4,700 to 5,000 metres, their water turquoise and still against the brown rock. From Gokyo-ri, a solitary figure looks out over the lake. the glacier, and the summit of Everest on the horizon. These are among the highest freshwater lakes on Earth. Along the ridge trails, a lone trekker in a red jacket moves across the rock, prayer flags marking the high points. The scale of the terrain reduces everything human to a point of colour against white and grey. The Dudkoshi continues below, milky blue and Ophisthum, fed by the same ice that has been receding for decades. The summit rocks at 8,849 metres are marine limestone pressed from the floor of the ancient Tethys Ocean and lifted by the same collision that built the range. The highest point on Earth is made of what was once the bottom of an ocean. The journey through Nepal follows a single line upward. It begins in the heat of Lumbini, where a man born 25 centuries ago changed the course of human thought. It passes through the Kathmandu Valley, where ancient cities have rebuilt themselves after every earthquake. It climbs past rhinos that were nearly erased and villages the modern world has barely reached. It crosses the desert of Mustang, the glaciers of Annapurna, and the stone cairns of Dugla Pass. It ends at 8,849 metres on summit rocks made of ancient seabed, the highest point on the planet built from what was once the lowest. Nepal holds 8 of the 10 tallest mountains on Earth, more than 120 languages, and a calendar that runs 57 years ahead of the rest of the world. None of these facts alone explain what makes this place what it is, but together they describe a country that has compressed the full range of the planet into a strip of land barely 200 kilometres wide. The mountains were here before Nepal. They will remain long after. What matters is what people have built in their shadow.